having me here. I guess what we decided to do was Q&A of some kind. I started brewing in '99. A friend of mine gave me a beer across the fence, and that's really got me started. I started with a Mr. Beer kit. And, my wife got me a Mr. Beer kit for Christmas, and that didn't turn out so good. But I don't think it was the fault of the Mr. Beer kit, actually. I think it was the fault of my fermentation, my water, and not getting the chlorine out of it, and a lot of different things. And so that drove me to make much better beer, and I'm kind of OCD, so I just became obsessed with making the best beer possible, and that got me into competitions, and that got me into writing magazine articles, and that got me into writing books, and that got me into doing the Brewing Network shows and all that stuff. So, and then at one point I quit my software job, and my wife was saying, well, you need to do something. I said, I could open a brewery. And all the times I said I could open a brewery before, she said, no, you have a good software job. This time she said yes. So now, for the past 5 years, she has worked full-time for a brewery, and myself as well. So that's Heretic Brewing Company. And you'll see our beers up here every so often, different places. So that's kind of my bio. The difference between home brewing and pro brewing is pro brewing is a business, and so you need to be aware of business. It's funny, I get people that ask me all the time, they say, well, I'm a home brewer, every time I enter I get best of show, I've been working really hard on perfecting my brewing skills. I want to open a brewery. What brewing classes should I take? I'm like, well, it sounds like you already know how to brew. Like, yeah, but not on the professional level. Sounds like you already know how to make great beer. How's your business sense? How's your ability to manage your cash flow and all that other stuff? That's what you need. That's the difference between home brewing and pro brewing. You all can make the greatest beer in the world. You could make better beers than any commercial brewery. You have that ability. There is nothing to stop you from doing that. It isn't like there's some sort of magic that happens when you get a commercial license that all of a sudden your beer is better and it's the God's gift to the... There's a lot of commercial brewers who believe that bullshit. But I'm here to tell you, you can make a better beer than a commercial brewer. And part of the reason is you don't have to worry about the commercial aspect of it. You don't have to worry about costs or how long something takes or how you're going to name it, how you're going to license this or that. Did the TTB approve your label? All that bullshit. That doesn't matter. You can just focus on the beer. You have the greatest opportunity in the world. You can make the best beer possible. There's nothing stopping you from it. There's not like a piece of equipment or some... There's not like some magic equipment that they give you when you get a commercial license that all of a sudden makes your beer better. Contrary, I think a lot of homebrewers go commercial and they make crappy beer. They were great homebrewers and now they're making shitty beer. Excuse my language. But it's because they're, struggling with, various aspects of it. But, don't let that stop you. So that's one of the differences. I still consider myself a home brewer. I do it on a much larger scale, and I get to sell it. But other than that, I mean, we make our core products that generate all the revenue. And then we have, so that's like 3 products, three brands of beer. But we make another 30 kinds of beer. And why do we make those other 30 kinds of beer? Because I want to. Why do you homebrew? Why did you make that weird beer you made? Because I wanted to, right? Same thing, that's what I do. So we got our core products that we make and we sell, and they do great for us and they pay the bills. But that doesn't stop us from making another 30 different kinds of beer that are weird and crazy and nobody sees the economic value of them. I wanted, why are we making a 3.5% bitter? Because I want to drink it. That's the answer. Oh, no one will buy it. I don't care. All right, when you own a business, that's what you dream about being able to say, right? That's kind of the difference between commercial and homebrew. I believe in minimal water adjustment. I think people more often make their beers worse than better by adjusting their water. They make big mistakes. Because the information out there has been, do these huge adjustments, and your water should be like Burton-on-Trent. Nobody's brewing with the water from Burton-on-Trent. Oh, your water should be like that of Pilsen. Well, you go to the brewery in Pilsen, you get water in the out of their tap, and it's nothing like what's reported as classic Pilsen water. So all that's bullshit. Excuse my language. So what you're looking to do is make sure your pH is correct, and you can do that with just an acid adjustment of your water. Knock some of the buffering compounds out, and then the mash will naturally hit that right pH. But I can see adding some gypsum, I can see adding some chalk. That's all we do at Heretic, and that's all I really did as homebrewer. I tried different things, but again, it just messes things up more than anything. And then if you're going to make an adjustment, make a small adjustment. You can always go up from there, but if you go crazy with your water adjustment, you're just going to hurt yourself, I think. Phosphoric to adjust the acid, or adjust the pH of the water and knock down some of those buffering compounds that are in your water. Yeah, phosphoric's fine. You could use lactic. Lactic's a little easier for most homebrewers to get in concentration. Lactic's fine, phosphoric's fine. In great amounts, they have a flavor. They say lactic is it tends to be a little sharper. Phosphoric tends to taste a little more like soda. You could use citric and it'll be fruity. You could use sulfuric and you get sulfur in there. You could use, but it takes just a tiny amount of sulfuric, or you could use almost any acid. Some of them are very strong and use very little. But lactic or phosphoric is very easy. Yeah, is there a difference between table sugar, corn sugar? When a recipe calls for simple sugar, anything over like a small amount, if it's not 5% or something, the taste contributions be minimal. But you can use honey, which is essentially mainly fructose and glucose and all that. You could use table sugar. You could use corn sugar, dextrose. You could use milk sugar. You could use lactose. You could use there's a lot of different things you can use, and they all do have a different flavor contribution. It's very, very subtle. So unless you're tasting things side by side, a lot of times it's not that significant a difference. It depends on what you're brewing. Generally, on those Belgians and things like that, instead of going candy sugar, if you're looking at like light candy sugar, clear candy sugar, you can just use table sugar, and the difference is pretty much the same. But yeah, in side-by-side tests, different sugars result in different behaviors by the yeast and produce slightly different flavors. Yeah, I don't know. I think that happens independent of it. The higher ABV, that contribution I think would be no matter what. It's the substrate that the yeast are using to process and build. I think that's more important, and that happens whether it's a smaller beer or a bigger beer. So the two together, I don't know that it's that much more significant in a bigger beer than a smaller beer, the type of sugar you use, unless you get to a point where the yeast are unable to consume all those simple sugars and there's residual left over. Then I would say, it's like making mead. When you make a mead where it ferments out completely and it's dry, it doesn't taste much like honey. But if you put so much honey in there, the yeast cannot process it all, then the mead all of a sudden takes on the character of the honey. So then the different, varietals of honey make a difference. And I think, perhaps the sugar would as well. Raw sugar, table sugar, honey, whatever it might be. Then definitely, yeah. What style was most challenging to perfect and why? That's a good question. Which one did I really struggle with? I've perfected them all. They're all perfect. I don't know if you've seen the book, Brew Classic Styles, but that pretty much tell you right there. That's a really good question. I've never been asked that question. I don't know what the answer is. I would say the most difficult has been the lambics. That is a tougher one because it takes so long to get a result. That is a good question. And so that has taken some time to really perfect what you're doing. If you go down to Belmont Station, they've got our blackcurrant agony on, which is essentially a fruit lambic. And I think we've mastered it at that point. I think it's really good. I think it shows all the character and all that.
Is it spontaneous?
Not spontaneous. We've done spontaneous. Well, maybe the toughest thing is the spontaneous ferment. Good point. I'm always learning, just like you guys. I'm always learning every time I do something. So what we have been doing is we're in a valley with wineries and fruit growing regions and all this stuff, and the wind comes in off the ocean from the San Francisco Bay Area and goes up our valley, and I think it's ideal for spontaneously fermented beers. And so every year during the winter, I wait for at least 3 freezing nights below 32 degrees, and then we set out wort and see what spontaneously ferments. And we've done this a couple times now, and it's amazing how well it turns out. And we've actually isolated different strains of Brett that we don't really know what they are. We've sent them to UC Davis for some analysis, some DNA analysis, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't match anything else. So I think we've got our own, and there's like tons of different kinds of bacteria, and so it's a lot of fun. And I think that in and of itself is going to be really difficult as well. But it just takes so long. So we do on our we do other things that we've got a beer where there's a winery in our valley, and they actually ferment their wine based off of whatever's on the grapes. So the yeast, you hear that grapes are covered in yeast and bacteria. So they just smash the grapes just like it was done in the old country, and they make wine from it. And it's fantastic wine. And so we've made beers where we take once the wine's done fermenting, they press the skins to get the wine out, and then it's normally compost. We actually take that, we shovel it into the manway of one of our fermenters, and then we pump a wort in, and then we ferment a beer on that, using that same funky yeast that's local to our valley. And it turns out amazing. Called Blood of Jupiter. We're going to do it again here in another couple of weeks. It's all timed with the production of their wine. So we're doing that. It went real quick. The question was, did it take a while to mature? In a month it was ready to drink, and it tasted very wine-like, and then very rapidly the wine character dropped off and completely disappeared. And we were like, oh man, it was really short-lived. And then all of a sudden it came back on, and it changes. Like every few months it was like a totally different beer. So it's based off of the organisms that are in it. So I had a lot of fun with it. So the question is, how did we, specifically for Blood of Jupiter, we did it all in stainless steel. Never went to barrels. And it worked out great.
How do you inoculate?
how did we inoculate? The grape skins themselves are covered in yeast and bacteria. That's how the wine was fermented. So it's all in there already. And that's how, it's what was naturally in the air and landed on the grape skins. And I think the acidity of the grapes and the sugar of the grapes, it kind of preferentially favors one type of organism over another, and that's why wine just happens. And so that was in there, and that's what we use to ferment it. Now, when we do the spontaneously fermented ones, we actually take 55-gallon drums, fill them up with wort, we put them on our scissor lift. We have these louvered vents in our roof, skylights in our roof. We put them on the scissor lift, and we run them up to the skylights and leave them overnight. And then we bring them back down, put a lid on them, and see how they ferment. And they form a croissant on them that's 3-4 inches thick overnight. They just rip. There's a ton of yeast in there. I thought we have a Budweiser facility about 10 miles away, and I always thought, if we do this, it's going to taste like lager all of a sudden. It's going to taste like Budweiser. We haven't found any lager yeast in it. We haven't even found any ale yeast in it. We found all Brett and just a ton of different kinds of bacteria. So in our lab. No, I don't think the smack packs really disturb the yeast. I think if you really mash it down, you're probably killing some cells. But in commercial yeast, I think the most important thing is fresh. Now, whether it be Y yeast or White Labs or any of these things, I don't get any money from any of them. I've gotten a couple of free T-shirts from Y yeast. I've never gotten any. White Labs has never given me anything. Other than friendship and knowledge and great yeast, they don't give me anything. So I feel free to talk any way I want because it's not going to affect. They'll still sell me yeast, believe it or not. I pay $1,600 per pitch. So, but I think the most important thing is the freshest yeast. And all of them will put a code date on there saying, hey, it's good for 6 months. I'm telling you, it's dying from day one to throughout the 6 months. Maybe it's still alive at 6 months, but you don't have as much live yeast at 6 months as you do at 2 days or 6 days. So try and get the freshest yeast possible. How many what? Generations do we do? How many generations do we do on our yeast? All right, for $1,600, you want to brew a few batches, right? Because if we don't, the cost of our beer would skyrocket. And it's difficult. When we want to do things like lagers, we'll brew like a Helles, we'll do an Oktoberfest, we'll do a Doppelbock. And then that's 3 uses out of $1,600. That's $500 per batch extra. It adds dollars per keg.
30 barrel?
Yeah, and we'll do like 30 barrel batches on those. Now, on our main yeast, we use 001, and we'll pitch the first batch, and then from that we can pitch like 2 more batches, and then from each batch you can pitch at least 2-3 more batches. And we'll do, maybe on average about 15 generations. Sometimes we'll do as low as like 8, sometimes we'll do as much as 20. We monitor our yeast and we look in the lab to see if the yeast are looking different or behaving different. We check our pH every day, we check our attenuation every day. And when you do this, you start to learn about a yeast, and you will see that the curves are always the same for a given yeast. And when that curve is not the same, when that attenuation, that pH change is not the same, something's wrong with your yeast. You need to, cut and run at that point. But if it's all looking good, and then the yeast look good under the microscope, everything seems copacetic, then you're good to keep going. So that's how we do it. And from that we can get, it's maybe 15 pitches, 15 generations, but it's that could be 50 different batches or 60 different batches. We have the seasonal question. If you're doing a pumpkin beer, how and when do you add the pumpkin? The first trick is in growing your pumpkins. You need to plant early. One seed, 4 to 6 inches apart, mounded in little hills, about a 1/4 inch deep. Water, often keeping the soil moist. Yeah, you got to grow the pumpkins first. What I've done with pumpkins that I still tend to stick to is take your pumpkins, slice them up, put them on cookie sheets, put them in the oven around 300, 350. Bake them. They'll caramelize. You'll actually see like a brown sugar kind of look come out of them, and they'll get soft. And that sugar has a lot of flavor to it, and a little bit of sweetness, and some sugars that can be used, and there's some starches there, and you've kind of broken everything down. Scrape all that into your mash, and then do it through the mash, and put plenty in there. Put some rice hulls in there. I think that's the best way to do it. That's the way I like to do it. I suppose you could throw it into the boil as well. You're probably going to get a massive starch haze because all those starches in the pumpkins just aren't converted at that point. But that could be fun. Yeah, go to try. You're doing the East Coast pumpkin beer, huh?
Yeah.
All right, East Coast pumpkin IPA. Woo! It'll be juicy. Oh, all right, good question. All right, so business class. If you're opening a brewery, and everyone, when you want to open a brewery, you don't need brewing classes. If you already know how to brew, you need business class. And you need to know how to, do a cost of goods. You need to know how to manage cash flow and accounting and things like that. Now, did I take business classes? No. Do as I'm telling you, son. No, not as I do. But I did run a few businesses before, and then I worked in corporate America for quite a while, doing a lot of things that helped me tremendously. So if you have a job where, you're running a business, then I think you're good. I mean, it's knowing how to run that business and knowing how to, just manage a business is the hardest part of running a brewery, because if you don't know, there's so many stories of great breweries that have failed because they overcapitalized. They were doing great, so they made a $5 million expansion. And all their award-winning beers, it's going to pay for it because we'll sell 3 times as much beer. No, that didn't work out, and they just went down the crapper. Happens all the time. Breweries tend to go out of business because they can't afford their debt, not because there's breweries making horrible beer that are doing just fine because they manage their business well. So,
Can I jump in?
sure.
So PSU actually has a business course specifically for brewers, and it's the business of craft brewing, and that's a great thing. I'd like to know some of the things, your influence in Gordon Strong as well, as far as what makes good home brewers win awards like you do.
How do you win anything? It's like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, 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 right? So I started out, Mr. Beer Kit, making crappy beer, and how did I do better? I kept brewing, and trying, and learning, listening to everybody, and learning from all the people around me that taught me things. I did not magically come up with how to brew beer on my own. It exists around you. All the people around you have nuggets of information, and it's important to be able to discern what's crap and what's true. That's probably where I have a science background from UC Davis, and that helped a lot because I was able to do some scientific method and say, well, all right, no, that's nonsense. Oh, that actually works, and kind of the engineering mind on how to improve the process and get a better result. So I think that's the trick. Brew a lot, brew often, keep track of what you're doing, Don't do like tons of wild changes. I think that's the key. Do one change, see what happens. You know, it's patience. It's work. It's like anything. How do you all y'all have jobs, right? One or two of you homeless looking guys, maybe not. But all y'all have jobs, and how do you get good at what you do? I bet you there's people in here that are just like experts and incredible craftspeople at what they do. How did you get there? Did it just fall in your lap, or have you worked your ass off your entire life to be really damn good at what you do and be paid for what you do? Yeah, that's how you got there, right? So brewing's no different. You're not just like going to randomly, fall in your lap. You're going to work your ass off, and you're going to become a great brewer. You could be, again, the world's greatest brewer. There's nothing stopping you from that but the hard work, right? But I'll tell you what's going on in the beer world is, if somebody pays $1 billion for something, they expect to get several $1 billion in return. They're not doing it out of the kindness of their heart to help, this poor brewer, who their beer should be more spread worldwide. No, that's nonsense. What they're looking at is this profit. And I guarantee you, at some point, they're going to say, the numbers aren't quite going up like we thought they were. I think we're going to need to tighten our belts. Maybe if we changed from this malt that you use to this one's much more cost effective, no one will know the difference. And we're going to save 1/4 cent per pound. And, this is going to happen. That's going to, all of a sudden they're going to just change everything. And it's going to be totally different beer, totally different brewery. And the people are not going to matter. People with insane amounts of money don't think people matter. Often. I mean, there are people who do. And they're good. They're the good ones. But the majority of them, they got all this money from being bloodthirsty. And they're going to continue doing it. And it's the same thing with breweries. And I don't have ill will towards anybody who sells their brewery. If you start up a business of making shoelaces and somebody comes and offers you this insane multiple of your shoelace business, sell it. And if what your passion is shoelaces, after the non-compete expires in 2 years, go open another shoelace factory. Same thing for brewing. Just if I was to sell Heretic to Satan for a check with a ton of zeros, what I would do is write all my employees a check saying, all right, none of you are under the non-compete. Here's a check. I want you to take 2 years of vacation, and then when we come back, we're opening another brewery. Because you cannot. So if somebody was to buy Heretic, what would they purchase? They purchase the name. They purchase the brands, the marketing, distribution, whatever. Yeah, it's worthless. They buy the equipment. They can buy the inventory, the recipes, whatever. What can't they buy? Well, they can buy me. I don't know if you know what kind of a hoe I am, but they can't buy our people. That's the heart and soul of what we do. The people we have, I believe in our people. They're wonderful people. And you cannot buy them. Right? If those people all go, yeah, I'm sure all of you experience when one of your favorite breweries changes their head brewer. And all of a sudden the beer's different. Why is the beer different? Sometimes it's for the better. Sometimes it's for the worse. Why? All the equipment and recipes, everything's the same. What happened? You lost critical people, and that's the thing you can't buy. You cannot own people. Well, you can own me, but you can't own my people, and that's the difference. So growlers versus crowlers. I think a growler's a better container than a crowler.
Does that mean you bottle a better container than a can?
No. Well, and here's the reason why. All right, so bottles versus cans. I'll tell you all why you're all wrong. Parno Steve's got it right. I'll tell you what. So when we package in cans versus bottles on the canning line and the bottling line, we actually can get much lower errors in the bottles. We can get down to like 15 parts per billion. On the cans, we can get down to about 30, 35 parts per billion. And the finest Crohn's line, that's what they tell me they can get down to. So a higher air in the cans to start, but not much. I mean, Anheuser-Busch's measure of air is, limit is 120 parts per billion, which is great. When you hand package something, a lot of times you're at like 3,000 parts per billion. So if you do, cans or bottles, the advantage to the can is that once it's sealed, it's hermetically sealed, it does not breathe, does not expose it to light. It's lighter, it doesn't tend to break, so cans are great packages. And that 35 parts per billion you got in there, that's all that's ever going to be in there until you open it. On a bottle, the caps tend to breathe, and only if you keep the bottles at a steady temperature, they don't breathe. But if the temperature goes from hot to cold, the bottle's rigid enough that it pulls in air past the cap, or it'll squeeze out. So that's the problem with bottles. That and the light that gets through, even in an amber bottle. So that's a negative there. Now on the growler thing, what happens is, if you're filling a growler, that opening is so large. When you drop that lid on there, you're getting a ton of air in those things. So it's it's sealed, but it's just a massive amount of air. If you're not running them on a production line and you don't have the ability to test for, it cost us $25,000 to test our package oxygens. And most people doing growlers are not testing any of them to figure it out. But when you fill a growler, that cap on the top is so small, and if you got foam shooting out the top and you put the cap on, it's better than a large surface, even on foam on the growler. So, you're not going to save a growler for that long. The growler, you're going to keep it cold so it's not going to breathe. So I'd go growlers over crowlers. For long-term exposure, I go cans over bottles, but you can get a lower oxygen in your bottles if you have a really nice bottling line.
Yeah.
If you have a crappy bottling line, it doesn't matter. You'll get worse than cans. The news tends to focus on breweries that are opening, but there's plenty of breweries closing on a regular basis. No, they're small ones that are just poorly managed. So here's the thing not to do when you open your brewery. Do not think that, oh, you know what? I will just sell my beer as cheap as possible to get into these accounts, because once people taste it, they will pay anything to get my beer. If you start out, undervaluing your product, you'll go out of business really quick because you won't make any money. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was from Vinny at Russian River. He said, price your beer and sell your beer for what you need to sell it for in order to make a profit, employ your people, and see tomorrow. If you're doing it because you think it's on marketing or a business way to get market share, that's for highly overfunded, venture capital breweries that go in and hoe themselves in the market and get the stupid distributors to bite and,
sell out.
And then they sell out. And then Miller Coors buys them, or ABI buys them. And that's what they're set up to do. And if, as a small brewer, you cannot compete on that scale. The only thing you compete on is quality. If you don't have quality, well, then you're going to suffer. There's quality and marketing. Those are the two things you can compete on. Don't compete on price. You'll be in real trouble. All right. So when we started canning, one of their facility guys, who spent 25 years at Anheuser-Busch adjusting the seamers, came over and for a couple of growlers of beer taught us how to adjust the seamer. And so we have great non-leaky seams. It's a very mystical, difficult thing to do. And if you don't have that knowledge, if you don't have the skill set to do it and the equipment to measure all your seams, we actually have a camera and a saw. So we saw the cans open and then we image them on a camera that gives us the measurements of all the seams in on a screen on a computer. If you don't do that, they're going to leak in the front seat. When 21st Amendment first started canning, Sean, good friend of mine, he was filling them on a little machine and hand seaming them, and he was like, here's a six-pack, and I loved the beer, and I put the six-pack in my car, and before I could drive home, half the beer had bubbled out of the can as fast as it seems. Now they don't have that going on today because they got high-tech equipment, but back in the day, that's a big problem with the growlers. And I just think it looks cool, but it's not the best way to handle the beer. So whole hops versus pellets. You're hitting on all the old classics, my standards. Yeah, there's a difference between whole hops and pellet hops. And I think if you're, a brewery where you get bales of hops and you store them frozen, thousands of pounds at a time, I think, I can see some value to whole hops. But for everybody else, the great thing about pelletizing is it makes the entire batch nice and uniform, and then the slick nature of the outside of it tends to kind of protect it from oxidation. And the pellet hops you use today versus, especially if you keep them in a nitrogen flush bag in your freezer, the pellets used 2 years from now, they're so similar. There's so little degradation between that and 2 years down the road. The pellets are a great way to go, and they utilize better. You get better extraction of the alpha acids and all the compounds that you're looking for. So I tend to go, at our brewery we do pellets, all pellets. Jerky Randy.
As a home brewer, if there was one aspect of the process of home brewing that makes the biggest difference, is it
temperature control.
Temperature control of fermentation?
Yep.
More so than yeast pitch?
Yep. Yeah, I think
We're gonna do 2 more questions.
controlling the actual, now when I talk temperature control, a lot of times people go, well, the room I'm in is 65 degrees. It's like, well, I don't care what the room temperature is. What's the temperature of the beer? Because the beer temperature tends to spike as the yeast are producing a lot of exothermic.
Moving around and doing whatever.
They're putting out the heat. If you're not controlling that specific thing, you're going to run into trouble, because then it fades and it drops down. You actually need to control the temperature of the beer. So put your thermocouple on the outside of the fermenter, cover it with insulation, and you'll be good. All right.
What is your temp schedule?
What's my temp schedule? Well, it depends on the beer. So lagers, ales.
I'd say most of your ale.
Most of our ales will start at 67, and we'll go up a couple of degrees from there for most of our clean ales. When they're Belgians, we'll start there, and we'll go up to maybe 73.
And then your lager, you drop down below, let it naturally rise.
Yeah, so our lagers will start about 45, and then we'll just let that rise up, and then we'll hold it around 50, 52. And through most of fermentation, towards the end of fermentation, we'll raise it up a few more degrees. For
What do you top out for your diacetyl rest?
top out for diacetyl rest, it might be like 58, 60. How do you add fruit to beers? Well, it depends. So I've got 1,000 pounds of locally grown blackberries that the guy's like, hey, I need to get these over to you. I don't have room to store them. I used to look at adding fruits, at the end of the boil or in the fermenter during ferment and all that. Now, What I'm tending to do is, we mainly use fruits on sours only. So we'll do the souring for a year and a half in the wine barrels, and then we'll add the fruit at the end. And this is the way Cantillon does it. They'll move the sours over to a stainless fermenter. They'll add the fruit and they'll let that ferment out for a week or two, and then they'll package, because you get the most fruit character that way. Now, if you're worried about contamination or something like that from the fruit, I'd say don't worry. Unless you're packaging it in bottles and putting it on the shelf warm at Bevmo, it doesn't matter. Just keep your bottles cold, you'll be fine. So I would do the same thing. Oh, conditioning in the bottle. I think that's fine. I don't think that there's any real advantage to it. People go, oh no, it's a finer carbonation or something like that. That's bullshit. That really doesn't make any difference or any bit of sense. But conditioning, and then there's like, oh well, conditioning the bottle eats up the oxygen, all that. Well, unless you're filtering your beer, there's yeast in your beer, and it'll consume a lot of that. So, not necessarily a problem. Conditioning in the bottle, if you have tanks of carbon dioxide and a kegging system, for God's sakes, use that. Don't do the bottle conditioning thing, because you end up with too much yeast in the bottle, and the yeast will die and ruin it. And people tend to think, well, a bottle condition, it'll last longer. It's barley wine that I want to keep until my child that's born today is 21 and can share it with me. If you got a big slug of yeast in the bottom, it's just going to taste like soy sauce. It's going to be meaty and it's going to be nasty. So you don't want that yeast in there. So that's why I like forced carbonation on packaging of that. If it's shorter term, then again, what's the value? I mean, if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. But if you can do it otherwise, I'd skip it.
What is your?
You're gonna have different carbonation levels.
What?
Like a Belgian beer. Belgian beer wants a higher carbonation than what is the standard at most bars and keg systems.
Oh yeah, most.
Example, brewery here, the Commons.
Yeah.
They'll serve their farmhouse in a keg. It's going to be served at the normal carbonation level that all bars.
Right, like 2.5.
But in a bottle condition, definitely tastes much better.
Right, but you can
taste.
Well, but you could package it at a higher carbonation level.
In the keg.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, or in the bottle.
Yeah.
You don't have to bottle condition to get high carbonation in the bottle.
Okay.
You could, set whatever carbonation level and then package it at that higher carbonation level. So.
Isn't that going to depend?
For a home brewer, I think it's much easier. Like you're saying, if you're doing like a 4-volume Belgian, for a home brewer, it's probably easier to do bottle conditioning.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
Because that's going to lose a lot of CO2.
CO2's cheap.
Isn't the draft system that it's on going to come into play if the regulator isn't set to maintain?
Right. Oh yeah. If you're,
That's part of the issue.
but if you're trying to serve a 4-volume beer on draft, the draft system has to be set up to serve it. You're just going to get foam. You're getting a mess. So.
I saw that today actually with that.
But that's how some beers should be served that way. It's just the belly should be served that higher.
Yeah, I think, in the marketplace, you just don't see appropriate serving of beers a lot of times,
Everything's more.
Everything has to be 2.5 volumes, or either everyone thinks it's flat or they think it's overcarbonated if it's not 2.5. 2.5 is what everybody's doing. That's the rare locale that wants, that's able to do it, yeah. But, that's the beauty of being a home brewer.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, and then I agree with you. You'd want to do bottle condition for something that's like high volumes. Yeah, that might actually be easier.
Is there techniques as a home brewer that you could get a corny keg to where it has a more effervescent, tighter bubble? I mean, colder, higher.
Oh yeah.
Does it matter if you try and go from the bottom?
No. There's no. The only magic to getting a tighter, finer bubble in the beer is letting the beer sit and let all that fine particulate settle out. Let the beer, if you let a beer, when I first realized this was when I was making Scottish 60 shilling. It's a real light beer. It doesn't really you know, when you first brew it, you get these giant bubbles and all that. Let it sit for a year. All of a sudden, you get this really fine, creamy, tiny little bubbles because and the sediment settles out.
It's ready to go right now.
So just give it time.
Same volume. Just
Yeah. I'd given up on a beer and I just put it in the back of the fridge, and sure enough, later on, it's fine.
tell about tell us about the serving, how you serve in your tap room, draft pressure, perlick faucets,
Right.
adjustable, how are you doing it for your own beers?
All right, so how we serve our own beers in our tap room? We do perlick, forward seals, all stainless, the whole entire path.
The pressure adjustable ones?
No. We have one or two for like really highly carbonated sours and things like that. But the rest of the beers are all like 2.5 volumes, 2.4 to 2.5.
No matter the draft length? Or is the draft length all the same?
All the length is the same, so we're almost, direct into the cold box, and every faucet has its own regulator, but they all tend to be within like a half a psi of each other.
Okay.
So
you don't change the PSI based on the style?
Most of the styles they belong at that psi, and the ones that don't, they're higher carbonated and they're on a flow control faucet.
Okay.
So we can dial it back and get it out of the keg without just an insane amount of foam. Yeah. So sours, most of the barrel aged stuff, saisons, things like that. Approach to creating a new recipe. Oh, back in the day, I think it was lots of research and looking for what other people had done and historic information, BJCP style guides and all that stuff, and then test brews and all that. Now it's just like, I don't know, Rain Man says, no, we're going to put this and that, and I want some of this, and underwear's on sale at Walmart, and then Rain Man's correct, and it just works out now. I don't know how I do it now, but I just know this is what I want.
It's always a good place to start by looking at Brewing Classic Styles.
Brewing Classic Styles. Have you picked up your copy of Brewing Classic
Sale
Styles?
for $15 out front.
I will sign them for
Slight
you.
variations of those recipes, you'll be good.
Yeah. Oh well, starting with something that you can trust. It's one of the reasons that I wrote Brewing Classic Styles is because there were so many bad recipes out there. I looked at those recipes; they were just bizarre recipes that made no sense whatsoever. But people put them on the internet, and I won, this, that, or this tasted the best to me, and there was a lot of nonsense. Yeah. So the value of Brewing Classic Styles is there's one person who created all those recipes, and if it wasn't me, I threw in a couple extras from people that I thought made a better recipe than me. But they're all the same. They're all consistent, so you can trust that they're all from a single source. I thought that was useful. So I really just want to be useful, not like sell anything. So final comments. I really want you to take away from this that you can make the best beer in the world. There is nothing stopping you from being the greatest brewer in the world, making God's gift to beer. It's just a matter of brewing it. Just keep brewing, don't stop brewing, keep trying. If something's not right, try again, learn, try again. Change one thing, try again. You will make the greatest beer in the world. Don't look to the commercial brewers. Those people are doing things for stupid reasons. They want to sell the beer. You don't want to sell the beer, you want to make the best beer in the world. They have to worry about that, you don't. And you can make... Commercial brewers have no secrets. If they tell you that, then they don't really know what they're talking about. Temperature control, that's the biggest difference between home brewers and commercial brewers. You can do that. That's cheap. You can buy everything you need on eBay. Buy everything you need right here. More Steinbart's right here. Oh, walk over here and buy it. Right. So don't ever think that somebody has it over on you. You've got it over on everybody else. And if you haven't done it today, brew it tomorrow. If you don't brew it tomorrow, brew it the day after. Just keep brewing, you'll get it. Trust me, just keep trying, you will get it. Thank you.
Everybody saying Jamil Zainasheff. I can't say enough. I've tried not to gush while I've been up here, but honestly, I've listened to every podcast from both your shows, and I've learned a ton, and these characters are familiar, and there's others in your history. There are others in your history, so it's been an inspiration, and it is a scientific method, what he said. It's not magic, it's brewing as much as this guy has brewed, and making the small changes, not the big sweeping changes which I want to make. I was like, oh, I screwed that up, let's just completely different. No, it's everything that he's done, which is, he's won so many awards, and it was a natural progress for him to become a fantastic commercial brewer as well. So we're honored to have you here, and yeah, so thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your stay here in Portland.